game. Well, I wanted to address in this segment the escalation in calls for the destruction of the Grayzone by the British state, something Kit has been covering, but which relates directly to an appearance by Aaron Mate on the Russell Brand program on YouTube, which is racking up millions of views. I don't know how many different lobbies you drove insane by just showing up there, Aaron. But here is a British state operative, I guess we can call him that. We could maybe call him, we'll debate whether he's an intelligence operative or not. And his name is Ross Burley. And he is calling explicitly for the censorship of the Grayzone at a this is actually a festival. I don't know who wants to go to like a festival and hear these boring spooks talk about disinformation. You've got like the Ukrainian sunflowers in front of them and they all have sunglasses on. It looks kind of hip. But they're just basically howling about anyone saying anything non-establishment related in public at some hipster festival in Estonia put on by the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And Ross Burley works for the UK Foreign Office.
Just very quickly as well, on a practical note, I think there's a responsibility of the social media companies, YouTube especially, who continue to host people like Graham Phillips and Patrick Lancaster. Even I saw Russell Brand, who has a huge following on YouTube, was interviewing a journalist called Aaron Mate on his channel. Aaron Mate works for the Grayzone. The Grayzone is a Russian propaganda outfit. So it's incredibly irresponsible for YouTube and other social media companies to continue to host these people.
Basically, what he said was he called the Grayzone a Russian propaganda outlet, right? That's a direct quote. And he basically called on YouTube to censor us and says that, and I think he implied that other people who host us, like Russell Brand, should maybe be censored too. What can I say? I mean, look, this is what we constantly face. It's getting, I mean, we have to keep repeating ourselves. But basically, people could, if they wanted to, if they object to something we publish a lot of material. All of us are pretty prolific. So there's a lot to address. If you disagree with it, you could write a rebuttal. You could say, this is what the Grayzone got wrong on this. Instead, they alternate, or they don't alternate. They just state two things. One, they call us names and libelous names like a Russian propaganda outlet, and they call for us to be censored. And that's just rinse and repeat every single week.
Kit, who is Ross Burley? Why is he significant here?
Well, I mean, it's deeply disturbing that, this is his casual calls for Grayzone to be, and those who platform its contributors to be censored and deplatformed. This is not just the inane ramblings of just some self-appointed disinformation expert, of which there are far too many now. I mean, this actually seems to reflect the British government's position. Ross has a lengthy period of employment, as you noted, at the Foreign Affairs, and he has an ongoing role within Whitehall's stabilisation unit as a civilian deployable expert. So in disinformation. So I mean, that does tend to suggest that his Centre for Informational Resilience, sounds like something out of 1984, is a British government cutout, conducting arm's length state operations. Even more sinisterly though, there's an online profile of Ross, which states that, like, during the period that he was working for the Foreign Office, he was also involved with Zinc Network. Now, this is a deeply shadowy and sinister British government psyops contract that does enormous amounts of work for the Home Office and the Foreign Office, most of which is hidden from public view due to the draconian Official Secrets Act. And it states that yes, he designed, implemented, and led several UK government counter-disinfo programs, including Open Information Partnership. It still is a kind of pan-European British disinformation and troll factory. Its own internal documents state that this was it was a risk that it would be perceived in this manner, and it's quite understandable why. It's effectively a network of NGOs, media outlets, and quote unquote fact checking organizations. Yes, like primarily based in what's called Russia's near abroad. This is the kind of constellation of countries that comprise the former Soviet Union, Warsaw Pact, and Yugoslavia. But I mean, in this region, OIP, as I should call it henceforth, it constructed this clandestine nexus of YouTubers and social media influencers that in order to create and promote very slick British kind of state propaganda covertly without that relationship being disclosed. There's all sorts of indications from that this organization's internal files that it effectively exists as a censorship and propaganda mechanism in and of itself. There's an amazingly revealing passage in which it is stated a key barrier to countering Kremlin disinformation is that it's often factually true. It's really quite extraordinary, and several of the organizations involved in this are extremely dubious. There's this Estonian-based fact checker called ProperStop. There's an internal assessment of the organization concluded it was linked to neo-fascist groups and had incited violence against Estonia's Russophone minority. And then, ProperStop content is being routinely shared by blue tick Twitter accounts, and has been since the start of the conflict in Ukraine. It's really quite shocking. And I just think that this represents quite clearly the British state's position on the Grayzone, and now, quite strikingly, OIP and also just more generally the British government's counter-disinfo operations, they are effectively assets of Andy Price, which some viewers will no doubt be familiar with from our series of investigations on Paul Mason's covert war on the anti-war, anti-imperialist left. He quite clearly, by token of having exposed that relationship and those connivances, Andy Price and his underlings would have every reason to want to censor and deplatform the Grayzone, and it's clear from the leaked emails that we've reported on that they can do this. In one, Price boasts about how he was behind YouTube's ban in the UK on quote-unquote Russian stuff. In another email, he boasts about how there's something we can do in respect of people using WhatsApp and ostensibly private chat platform to disseminate, again, quote-unquote disinformation. It's really disturbing.
Yeah. Andy Price is one of the most significant UK intelligence figures in the world of what they call counter disinformation, which is actually censoring any narrative or informational threats to the objectives of the British foreign policy establishment. And as you illustrated so clearly in your series, Kit, he was the key collaborator with Paul Mason, working together in helping to kind of electrify all of Mason's plots to neutralize anyone who criticized him on Twitter or at a protest or anywhere else. So he is also connected here to Ross Burley, who's called to censor us at this Estonian festival. But Kit, you also pointed out, well, I pointed this out too, but you might know this area better than I do, that Ross Burley is intimately, closely connected to Nina Jankowicz, the disgraced Department of Homeland Security Minister of Truth.
Oh yes, no, scary Poppins indeed. I mean, this is quite. It's a testament to how insidious and incestuous the counter disinfo sphere is. I mean, it's a very, very close knit collection of people. So, and Nina Jankowicz, who is fell from grace when people pointed out she had a history of publishing false information, smearing independent journalists as Russian assets, including the Grayzone and Aaron, and so that she, at least once, she may still do, sat on the Centre for Information Resilience's advisory board, and she is or was also an advisor to Open Information Partnership. And there's an official financial disclosure form which shows that she got thousands of dollars from both entities, like last year. the fact that this wasn't a disincentive to her receiving that Department of Homeland Security job rather suggests that actually that this was part of the reason that she was hired, and that it was intended to operate much like OIP as a censorship and disinformation mechanism, dictating what is true and what isn't, and censoring accordingly. I mean, again, we know from the leaked emails as well that Andy Price is in direct contact with Nina Jankowicz. It does tend to suggest that various counter disinfo operations that were conducted in the UK or by the UK are going to be transplanted stateside. So that's something to look forward to.
Max, I think we should play the clip again, because I think some people didn't hear it because of the sound, and I have it shared here if you want to try it via my screen. But what I find crazy is
just really quickly, Aaron, just to illustrate Kit's point here, you have Nina Jankowicz's own bio as a grantee, that she sits on the advisory board of Ross Burley's Center for Information Resilience and the Zinc Network's Open Information Partnership. And the Zinc Network, for those who might have gotten lost a little bit, is a UK foreign officer, UK intelligence cutout or contractor that's also been active in the Syrian dirty war. And so for Nina Jankowicz to have said that she wasn't, her counter disinformation department at the Department of Homeland Security, her disinformation governance board was not dealing with censorship. Well, just look at what the people she works for are saying and doing. It's all about censoring anti-war and anti-war voices and anyone presenting an alternative to the war state. Aaron, you were saying that
and if not for Nina singing those Mary Poppins songs, she would have been able to do it. I mean, that's what did her in, which is how ridiculous a character she is personally. But what didn't do her in was the fact that she's linked to all these various state propaganda operations. In fact, that's what got her the job. It was only that she's such a cartoonish figure that it didn't pan out. And look, as you're naming all these groups, it reminds me, this new group from this guy, Ross Burley, who called for us to be censored and libeled us as a Russian propaganda outlet. I'd never heard before of the Center for Information Resilience. And it feels like every single week we have to learn some new acronym and some new group, because there's so many of these groups. You mentioned Zinc, the Integrity Initiative, the Open Information Partnership. Obviously, Grayzone fan favorite is Bellingcat. There's the Institute for Strategic Dialogue. That's the group that slandered me with as a prolific spreader of disinformation on Syria. And by the way, a quick update on that. I recently lodged a complaint to them about that whole report that called me a spreader of disinformation on Syria. And in my complaint, I said, can you name one example of my alleged disinformation? And about 3 weeks later, they responded by changing their complaints policy and said, we only respond to complaints made in good faith. So it's apparently
a bad faith complaint.
Yeah, it's bad faith for me to ask them to substantiate with even just one example my alleged disinformation that they say I prolifically spread. So anyway, that's my experience with the Institute for Strategic Dialogue, and I can't keep track of all these different shady groups that keep popping up. But so I have the clip here if you want to try to play it again.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, Aaron, that report on you, it has this timeline, great, terrible moments in attacks on the white helmets on Twitter or something. And it's just a ridiculous report that names you as the #1 disseminator of disinformation on Syria, which means that you are actually one of the greatest journalists on Syria in English. That's what it means. This is an organization sponsored by the State Department, the arms industry, corporate America, Bill Gates, the UK Foreign Office, you name it. The whole oligarchy and its state apparatus is behind it. The author of it, her name isn't coming to my mind right now, but she was actually embedded with the US military as an Arabic translator to help them destroy Iraq. And she is now assisting a US state cutout in its plan to destroy Syria. So from top to bottom, this report is just filthy, completely toxic and corrupted. And I don't think it's working. So they're moving towards, they're just moving towards just straight up demands. Just get rid rid of them.
And listen, on your point about how, their aim is to destroy Syria, it's actually very made clear by not only who authors the report, but who they choose to consult as their expert voices. So the title of the report is Deadly Disinformation. And the subtitle accuses people like myself of causing real world harm to Syrians. Okay. Real world harm. That's the wording they use. Who do they consult as an expert for their report? One of their top expert voices, I mean, all of them are state funded basically, but one of their top expert voices is a guy named James Jeffrey, who he was a senior official under Trump, also, I believe, a former U.S. ambassador to Turkey. And he is someone who has openly bragged that U.S. sanctions, which he helped design, have, quote, crushed Syria's economy. He's bragged about that in foreign affairs. I've cited it many times. And he's also talked about how Syria is desperate for reconstruction aid after the 10-year dirty war, but he's helped deny that. So this is a guy who's bragged about crushing Syria's economy, denying it reconstruction aid, and also is the guy who lied to the White House when Trump was trying to, or apparently trying to pull U.S. troops from Syria. He's the one who bragged about lying to the White House and not revealing the true number of U.S. troops that were in Syria to undermine these calls for withdrawal. So that's who the Institute for Strategic Dialogue turns to as an expert on supposed people causing real world harm to Syrians, someone who has caused and bragged about causing huge harm to Syrians.
Yeah, and the report was also kind of co-authored by the Syria campaign, or sponsored by it, the Syria campaign, which I exposed and others have exposed before me as the public relations wing of the Syrian White Helmets, which was the main kind of info war ancillary of USAID, the UK Foreign Office, and the jihadist rebels in Syria. So the Syria campaign is behind all of this. It's just a continuation of the information war that because they lost the actual war,